Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 5th of November 2025. I have an appointment today. I've got a biopsy today, so, wish me luck and all that. So my output's going to be somewhat different as it usually would. There's probably going to be a big gap most of the day until I get back and whatnot. So apologies for that in advance. But in the meantime, please like, subscribe, and share. And we'll get into the hits and losses that have taken place over the last 24 hours in Ukraine. Okay, so let's go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. It's looking pretty hairy in Pokrovsk, in the city itself, even though the Ukrainians having some success to the north. That said, the numbers are, fairly typical, I guess. 900 personnel loss, which is below 1,000, and 70 vehicles and fuel tanks, which is below 100. So I guess there's probably limited places that there is activity along the front line, but where it is happening, it's happening big time. Pokrovsk is obviously one of them. You've got Kupiansk, you've got a couple of places like Kamyanska. I think Konstantinivka has even calmed down a bit, as the Russians have had to bring troops from Konstantinivka, which is kind of just above Pokrovsk, but they've had to bring troops down, as far as I understand it, to Pokrovsk to try and flood the zone there. And then there's the activity going below Pokrovsk on that front line, that eastern front line, right down to the south of Donetsk, which I think the Russians are still having some success at, but both sides are fairly thinly spread. Anyway, 3 tanks, 3 armored combat vehicles, 24 artillery systems, that's about daily average, 2 air defense systems, so that's useful there. So those are the stats. We are going to look at a couple of personnel issues. So first, we hear new intelligence from the National Intelligence Service of South Korea, indicating that up to 10,000 troops in North Korea now posted near the Russia-Ukraine border, with about 5,000 of them identified as construction units moved into Russia since September to help rebuild war-damaged infrastructure. That's an interesting number, because we heard that there were originally 14,000 troops in that area and that 2,000 of them had been killed. And then, of course, you've got your injured on top of that. So I wonder whether that is why 5,000 added to what's there now makes 10,000. And then the 5,000 are supposed to be construction personnel, but also talking about deminers as well. So my takeaway from this is there were a bunch of North Koreans. There were a whole bunch of North Koreans. Quite a few of them died and were injured. And now there's a whole bunch more. And they are supposedly construction or deminers, but they're probably just soldiers, and they're adding to Russia's capabilities and capacities north of the border there in Kursk. Okay, Playfar talks to us about how the Ukrainians have actually done a pretty good job of building defenses around some of these key areas, like the new Donbass line, where you've got these mixtures of different obstacles for particularly personnel. So where the Russians are attacking with huge numbers of personnel and light vehicles, it's actually quite difficult to traverse the terrain. So here's an example. So in the video, you can see a video that he's looked at. You can see how a Ukrainian drone strikes 2 Russian soldiers that were able to cross 4 lines of barbed wire and a ditch total, but were then caught and stuck at this particular geolocation while attempting to cross ditch number 2, filled with 3 more lines of barbed wire. In the picture below is a scheme of the defensive line. These types of obstacles continue to demonstrate themselves as effective because they do not require a lot of manpower to man, unlike large trench systems, but rather a lot of drones that control it 24/7 and strike anything trying to cross it, with the obstacles themselves slowing down the movement to give time for the FPVs to fly and denying any cover or camouflage to Russian soldiers, who become easy prey. So, okay, my understanding is big open ground, large ditches. You've got concertina wire, barbed wire, and dragon's teeth. You've got anti-tank ditches, different types of ditches, and then multiple versions of these. So it's like, oh, I've got to cross these. I've cut my way through these concertina wire stuff. I've got across these ditches and through the dragon's teeth. I'm now a second set of ditches in concertina wire, and that's when the FPV drones have spotted me, because it's taken so long for me to get from A to B. I'm getting caught up and eventually get stuck here. That is how to do it. And you don't need to man those, right? You just need to watch over them. And when you do see an attack, then you just pile in, as long as you've got enough drone coverage there and the electronic warfare resilience, then you can go about neutralizing any threat. So that is good news, that there's an effective defensive line that has been built up, at least in some of these places. Now, Emil Kestelheim, you haven't heard from him for ages, a part of the, is it the Blackbird group of intelligence? Yeah, Blackbird group. He is reporting how actually it's really difficult in Pokrovsk. Some people are saying it's now 3 kilometers to cross the neck of the cauldron there, which means you've got people, Ukrainians, stuck in Myrnograd and in this pocket that are potentially going to be trapped or are trapped. Ukraine may be repeating a costly mistake in Pokrovsk, he says. It's a recurring pattern seen, for example, in Vuhledar and Kursk, a reluctance to conduct a controlled, militarily justified withdrawal from a threatened salient when the situation no longer favors a defender. Situation in Pokrovsk is difficult for the Ukrainians. Russians have consolidated positions in the southern part of the city and are advancing further north. Most of the city is a grey zone where infantry groups fight without a clear front line. It's really interesting. Listen to George Barras from the Institute for the Study of War, interviewed on Times Radio, where he was talking about there aren't front lines. Like, you think of, you go to a map and you've like got a line here, a line there, and maybe you'll accept a grey zone here. But even in the grey zone, what you have is pockets of like the Ukrainians control here, the Ukrainians control there, but you've got Russians have infiltrated between them and control behind them. And it's almost like you need a mottled patchwork of control rather than single lines and really clearly defined zones of control. So that was very interesting. And this is kind of what Emil Castelhamy is saying here. But anyway, the latest Ukrainian counterattacks have not turned the situation decisively in Ukraine's favor. They managed to recapture various positions in Rodinsky, which is north of Pokrovsk, and in the Dobropilya direction, but the threat of encirclement in Pokrovsk and Myrnograd has not been removed. In Russian operational art, reinforcing success is a core element. After several failed mechanized assaults in the Dobropilya direction in October, Russia appeared to cease committing more resources to the failing salients and put even greater emphasis on Pokrovsk. In Pokrovsk, the chance of a decisive outcome is higher as the situation for the Ukrainians keeps deteriorating. Russian advances and continuous drone strikes have crippled key logistical routes. Getting reserves and supplies in or the wounded out is arduous. The phenomenon has been seen multiple times before. Russia advances on the flanks and creates an encirclement threat. Logistics become untenable for larger forces. Coordinated defense crumbles. Counterattacks don't fix it. And finally, Ukraine withdraws at the last moment. Even though advancing is slow and costly for Russia, Ukraine also suffers unnecessary losses in these situations. It has avoided major catastrophes, but decisions to withdraw have often come dangerously late. And the latest example was the hasty retreat from Kursk in spring 2025. The tendency is to hold ground as long as possible. That gives an opportunity for Russians to attrit the defending units. Staying in Myrnograd extends the Ukrainian front line by roughly 40 kilometers, and keeping the gap between Rodinsky and Pokrovsk open is difficult and costly. This is something Andrew Perpetua said. Why the hell haven't Ukrainians pulled out of Myrnograd? And actually, George Barros said similar things in his video that I just referenced, talking about how the Ukrainians have a tendency to hold on to places for too long that aren't strategically necessary for them to do so. Okay, politically, leaving Pokrovsk and Myrnograd would be a bitter setback, but if Ukraine retreats and conserves as much manpower as possible while avoiding the worst scenarios, the end result can be viewed as a Pyrrhic victory for the Russians. After a year of fighting the Pokrovsk-Myrnograd axis, losing the cities now would have limited effect on the broader operational picture. So essentially, when you get as close as you've got here, right? So Pokrovsk has long lost its operational use here. I've talked about this before. Someone called me up. I'm like, what do you mean that Pokrovsk isn't very useful anymore? Blah, 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 blah. Pokrovsk was useful when it was a logistical hub. So when you got roads that are going through that, then it's still very useful. As soon as like this, you've got to understand how functionality works. It's like extrinsic value. Like the value isn't the city itself, like a bunch of buildings, although you could argue that acts to slow down attacks, and you can defend those at quite a high attritional value. But actually, prior to that, the functionality of the utility of Pokrovsk comes in its logistics hubness. right? And as soon as those lines are interdicted, as soon as these roads are interdicted, and that happened like months and months ago, then its utility is gone. So when I say Pokrovsk doesn't have any, there's no kind of utility in keeping Pokrovsk now for the sake of Pokrovsk. I mean, like now. I'm not talking 6 months ago or 8 months ago or whatever. And so you don't lose much now. Like there's no great utility in Pokrovsk, in holding on to Pokrovsk, unless it's to keep the Ukrainians fight or keep the Russians fighting somewhere rather than further back, right? So but if that's the case, then you close off this pocket and fight along this line here, fight along the neck of the pocket rather than trying to maintain your forces deep in the pocket. Okay, so a Ukrainian retreat from the area doesn't mean Russia automatically gains momentum, which they could capitalize on immediately. Even though land and cities would be lost, abandoning the salient could benefit Ukraine militarily. The most acute threat of encirclement would be gone. Units could operate under better logistics, and the front would straighten and shorten by dozens of kilometers. Maps from this area are indicative visualizations. In practice, there is no clearly traceable front line. It's just what I was saying. Patrols can slip through porous defenses. Ambushes are constant risk, and troops hide amid the ruins of buildings, often in overlapping positions. Exactly. This is an issue elsewhere too, but the situation around Pokrovsk and Dobropoli is especially dynamic. It is clear that the Russians can feed troops into the battle from the southern side of the city, but after that, their actual level of control is a rough estimate. Okay, well said. So Euromaidan Press translates this as the situation in Pokrovsk in Donetsk is critical. Russian forces are massing and have already entrenched themselves in parts of the city. If Russia captures Pokrovsk, it would gain a major foothold and open the way toward Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. I wouldn't necessarily say that, as long as Ukraine remain fighting in along that neck, right? So it's not like you retreat. An operation withdrawal wouldn't be necessarily from Pokrovsk itself. It would be from here, from this pocket, and you keep the line straight along the neck there. So as long as that happens, it's not disastrous, right? Okay, so that's what they say. Right, we're going on to some videos now. Ukraine says it hit the new headquarters of Russia's infamous Rubicon crack drone unit 6 weeks after the previous strike. So they've had a double whammy on Rubicon, which hopefully will hurt them. This is not verifiable, but Ukrainian intelligence claim this is a moment an FP2 drone with 105 kilograms of explosives hit the base in occupied Avdiivka. So let's see what this footage shows. And it shows essentially a building that is supposedly the building for the Rubicon getting hit with a really significant drone. So anyway, that's all we know. We can't confirm the losses or who indeed was inside that building, but Ukraine claimed that was a big strike on the Rubicon headquarters there, and in fact that has been geolocated. As you can see here, GUI inflicts damage on the headquarters of the Rubicon unit using FP2 drones, according to Cyber Poroshno. A geolocation there to somewhere in Avdiivka. Okay, so that could be very good news for the Ukrainians. Really good news as well, if true, the SSO hits. So these are special forces, special operations forces, an Iskander missile launcher and air defense elements. So the special operations forces and Chernaya Iskra insurgent movement, don't know who they are, hit a transport loading vehicle for the Iskander missile launcher. The damage occurred near the village of Sanikova in the Kursk region. So this is back into Russia. You've got one of these loader vehicles being destroyed, apparently. They also burned down the IL-122 Harman radar station. That's a Harmony radar, so that's pretty useful. The radar was on duty near the village of Nizhny Rutets in the Kursk region. The small size radar was intended for detecting and tracking air targets and further targeting. This is useful because this looks like kind of sabotage, special forces, partisan activity in very key areas, and taking out Iskander launching capabilities, which I'm sure that would. I mean, once Iskander fires its missiles, how does it get those missiles loaded onto it? So therefore, it's functionally useless without loaders. I don't know how many loaders that they have, but that's certainly good news. Then we also hear that, as local channels are reporting in occupied Crimea, a Pantsir S-1 air defense system has been moved into Crimea. It's been spotted being transported along the Tavrida Highway from Kerch, so across the bridge, towards Simferopol. So typically such systems are moved from Russia to Crimea to replace those that have been damaged or destroyed. So we know that Primari and many other units have been very active in Crimea, taking out really key installations. And this is perhaps evidence that that's taken place because they're trying to replace them, but then you're feeding possibly very expensive and decent bits of kit into the meat grinder or into the attrition machine. Anyway, we've got another video here saying the SBU hitting hard near Pokrovsk in just 1 month. CSOA, so Alpha units eliminated over 1,500 Russian troops there, 39 artillery systems and multiple launch rocket systems, 18 air defense units and electronic warfare assets. And their tally near Pokrovsk also includes 20 tanks, 62 infantry fighting vehicles, 532 vehicles, and nearly 600 positions in key ammo and fuel depots. Now, when I was talking to you yesterday about how the Oryx loss sheets won't be reflective of the actual situation with regard to the ratio of Ukrainian vehicles lost and Russian vehicles losses, because these vehicles, 532 vehicles, are invariably not recorded by Oryx, although Andrew Perpetua, when he was doing his list, and I don't know why he's not doing it at the moment, probably just underwater with work, he did do that. But, you know, if you look at the ratio of these kind of key combat asset losses, you've got what, 20 plus 62, so that's 82 combat assets like tanks and IFVs compared to 532 vehicles. Now, some of those might be trucks that Oryx does list, but most of those are going to be vehicles, SUVs, quads, motorcycles, SUVs, quads, and buggies. And indeed, we have a buggy here caught on camera. I'll bring that in now. This is a video that shows the vulnerabilities of unarmored vehicles being used in this way. So you've got a buggy with goodness knows how many people packed into it. I don't know. There's got to be a good 8 to 10 people all told. A couple of people in the cabin. Outstanding strike, says Max 25 on the Pokrovsk direction of the front. Kamikaze drone flew into the Chinese Desert Cross 1003 all-terrain vehicle packed with Russian infantry. I don't know the damage done there, but you know that is, I think, a sign of what Russia are using to transport troops, unarmored vehicles, and their vulnerability, and B, you know, it can tell you about the lost stats and whatnot, but it would obviously be very useful to have a spotter drone to let you know exactly what's happened. So anyway, that's one of the sorts of vehicles that you'll see taken out in this particular list of 532 vehicles. Then we have another vehicle that is fascinating to see. So, First Separate Medical Battalion conducted a unique operation to evacuate a wounded man using an IRC with an armored capsule. So, this is an unmanned ground vehicle, remotely controlled, taking sustained attacks from the Russians, but it's got an armored capsule on board. During the route to the wounded man, the IRC was blown up by an anti-personnel mine, but was able to continue moving on a damaged wheel. And while returning to the transfer point, it was attacked by a Russian drone, but the wounded man was not injured or further injured thanks to the armored capsule. The total length of the route was 64 kilometers, of which 37 kilometers took place with a damaged wheel. This is absolutely astounding. And yet, it survived and it did its job. Really, really tremendous development for that UGC there. So that unmanned ground vehicle with a capsule, that looks like it's got a role to play. Okay, in the Kursk region, here's a video of a strike on a location on the Russian military deployment. Everything burned down. This is worth having a little look at. 2 minutes of people kind of gathering their stuff. I think they're billeting down in the cellar here, but the entire building is on fire just above them as they come up, and then they have to run out through, you know, burning ground to get out. I'm not going to show you too much of this too closely because I get sort of restricted and whatnot. But anyway, here is a troop position that has been absolutely shellacked. And as he looks back, you can see it burning there, and they will have lost, you know, quite a lot of equipment, I would have thought. But actually they did end up, it seems, surviving, or at least the people caught on that video survived. Here is another strike that's taken place. They've wrecked us, says the Russian, those damn hohos, which is an expletive kind of, or pejorative for the Ukrainians. Russians are reporting strikes on their strong point and bunkers with kaponias. So kaponias, they like fortifications you can shoot from. But yeah, just again, more destruction of bases and whatnot here. I don't know. It tells us too much. That kind of stuff is going to be happening all the time. Now, the partisan group Atesh says it's destroyed an R417 Baguette communication station at an airbase in Rostov-on-Don in southern Russia. The group posted a video showing fire beneath a vehicle and said the attack disrupted flight coordination. So you've got an expensive, I would have thought, comms vehicle there. And they've set that on fire at an airbase. So they're getting into an airbase, setting fire to equipment, and then exfiltrating from the airbase. Now, this is not the first time. We've seen helicopters and planes get taken out deep inside Russia, actually, at air bases. This is in Rostov-on-Don in Russia. So again, really significant that this kind of partisan activity can take place. Okay, moving on to distance strikes. Now, not a massive amount of details come out about these distance strikes, but we are going to start with really challenging news that Russia has dropped 5,328 guided bombs on Ukraine in October, which is the highest monthly total of 2025, according to Ukrainian MOD. The overall number since January has already hit around 40,000, matching all of the last year. So January to November, January through October, the more aerial bombs than were dropped, or they've matched the number of aerial bombs dropped in the whole of 2024, and there's still 2 months still to go. Thank you very much for my tea, sweetheart. My partner's working from home today because she's taken me to the hospital for the biopsy. So anyway, it's not Ivan. Ivan. No, it's not Ivan. Her dad giving me tea today. So anyway, this is very bad news because 40,000 in a year is going to way exceed what the Ukrainians are able to do. Ukrainians desperately need to scale up guided glide bomb manufacturing and scale up planes. They need to drop the same amount of bombs as the Russians are dropping. You know, I talk all the time about the necessity to scale up missile and drone production for long distance attacks, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and all that stuff. But actually, for the front lines, the single biggest impact on the front lines, I think, will be massive scaled usage of guided glide bombs by the Ukrainians, because that's how the Russians have had success on the front lines. It's basically that Russian success has been contingent upon that. Now, Russia will be able to use new turbojet-powered guided glide bombs capable of hitting targets up to 200 kilometers deep in Ukraine, according to Telegraph, citing GUR. This is really worrying. I have reported on this before, but yeah, the range of those guided glide bombs, not only they're using an absolute ton of them, but they are now more capable than they ever have been. Okay, in terms of drone usage by the Russians, it was a fairly quiet night last night. Russia fired 80 drones and no missiles. There was a 77% success rate, with 61 of them being taken out, which is okay, but you know, it's not the best interception rate, but there were fewer sent, so there is that. So you've got 18. Ukraine managed to shoot down 61 of 79, so maybe one was still in the air, which gives you 18 getting through. So that's better than most nights, but largely because they sent fewer. In Kramatorsk, a fire engine was damaged this morning, but the crew escaped injury. Look at them having to, protect their fire engines from drone attacks. Isn't that sad? Russia struck the city in free Donetsk 3 times after 9 o'clock. 2 civilians, a woman aged 66 and 72, were injured. And yeah, Nikopol hit again. What else do we have? Chernihiv region 2. So a lot of attacks on, it looks civilian infrastructure there, but the reality is the Russians, with the 7 locations that they did hit, probably were hitting military targets and military industrial complex targets. Now, for the Ukrainians, there were quite a few drones, I think, sent in last night, but we don't have too much detail. What we do know is that Oriel was target. It seems they tried to reach a power station there again, said Tim White at the time last night. It's not known if the drones actually damaged the thermal power plant in Oriel, and even if they did, whether there was any damage, even if they did hit them, whether there was any damage. Now, War Translated then this morning says tonight in Orlovskaya thermal power plant, so that's where we're talking about, it came under attack for the second time. The local governor stated the Russian air defense forces, quote, destroyed enemy drones and the debris damaged several private houses and an outbuilding. Meanwhile, local residents insist they heard powerful explosions. Don't really know whether it's a case of falling debris, again, actually hitting elements of the power station or not. So, yeah, not very clear information from there. We understand that in Vladimir region, a 750 kilovolt substation was hit for the second time in 6 days. It's one of the most powerful in Russia. It's been successfully targeted. Ukraine has repeatedly struck this key node in Russia's energy grid, critical for power and transmission and stability across the Vladimir region. One of the most powerful substations in Russia, holding strategic importance for the country's power grid. It has an installed capacity of 4,850 MVA. I presume that means megawatts, but I don't know too much about this kind of stuff. So yeah, twice in the last 6 days, that has been hit. Then we understand that Stolitomak, which is a petrochemical plant that was hit 2 nights ago, was reportedly caught fire again yesterday. So it was on fire last night as well. So that's good news that they were unable to come to terms with the fire at that location. And then Ukraine's GUR confirmed it coordinated with the Air Force and Special Operations Forces pilots to strike the oil refinery in Nizhny Novgorod. So I think this was either 2 or 3 nights ago. What's interesting here is they let us know how many struck there. So over 50 Ukrainian-made drones, including Boba, so the Beaver drones, and FP1 models. So I know that Beavers are used quite a lot in places like Crimea, I think, and they were used so earlier in the war way more, but don't really know what drones they're using too often actually at the moment. So there's a bit of an unknown, just because a lot of them happen at night. You don't see, usually they're much further away. It takes all night for the drones to travel through the nighttime to reach their destination, say 1,500 kilometers away. That's when you see the really long range drones, so like the Lyuti or the equivalents to like the FP1. But for these kind of medium rate or still long range, but well within the 1,000-kilometer range, so maybe 700 kilometers away or whatever, then you're never quite sure what's being used. It happens at night, things blow up. So what's interesting here is that over 50 were used. Now, there was a video that came out the next day from this oil refinery, from the Russians, people driving around it saying, hey, you know, nothing wrong here. But I don't know whether that was a previously recorded video after it had been attacked on another occasion. They'd been fixing it up, because apparently, you know, this was hit when after they had been trying to fix it up. I mean, those kind of explosions signify that there would be issues in the daytime the next day. So I think the Russians might be trying to pull the wool over the eyes on that one, and that actually the Nizhny Novgorod region oil refinery here could well have been hammered. The attack hit during repairs on a rectification column already damaged in earlier strikes. So who knows there? Right, and that's all I really have at the moment for strikes. Let's see if there is any recent news emerging. Russia's Black Sea port of Tuapse has suspended fuel exports, while the local oil refinery halted processing crude oil following the November the 2nd Ukrainian drone attacks there. That's very useful. The Russians are showing how long an FPV weighted drone can lie in wait for a target. In this video, the drone stayed on the road for at least a full day waiting for its target, and when it finally appeared, the drone was unable to take off and exploded just a few meters from the vehicle. So that's interesting. Other than that, yeah, I don't know that we've got any more information. All of that is what you already know. Okay, now we're going on to other bits and pieces. So first, we hear that Zelensky visited the allegedly encircled town of Pokrovsk. I doubt he went into Pokrovsk, to be honest. I mean, people saying this is epic trolling. This does definitely show up Putin. Putin doesn't do anything like this. At the most, he sends like a body double to Crimea. Zelensky goes and visits the front line. He hasn't done this for some time. It's going to be super dangerous around there, but good job for him. And he's got quite a few of his big numbers there. This is Sersky, and you've got was that Yermak as well, Andrei Yermak. So anyway, he's taking risks in visiting these frontline areas. Belgium shut down the Brussels airport last night due to suspicious drone sighting there. It's the first time Brussels airport was closed due to that activity. They need to do, obviously, a lot about this. And who is flying these drones? Like, really, we need to know conclusively who it is. And if it is definitely Russia, then this, to me, that's kind of an act of war. That is open act of espionage. And more drones were also spotted near Belgium's Kleine Brugel airbase, which houses the F-16 fighter jets. Moving on, Poland has charged a Russian couple with spying for the FSB after they received asylum as anti-Putin dissidents. I've been wondering about this throughout the war. Like, how many people have run away from Russia saying, "Oh, I'm so anti the war," but they're actually undercover FSB agents that are pretending to be dissidents, and they're working to spy for Russia. Russia is using asylum programs as cover for intelligence operations. Igor R. sent FSB encrypted reports while portraying himself as a political refugee. Wow. So well done for Poland for outing them, or him. Russian seaborne oil exports have seen the sharpest fall since early 2024 after the new US sanctions. The drop follows Washington's October the 22nd decision to impose blocking sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, Russia's two largest oil companies. So that's good news for Ukraine. And the analyst says, look, Russia's economic data tells a grim story. Retail sales fell 3.7% in September. Any economist would tell you that's a catastrophic fall. Official inflation is over 8%, but real inflation is around 28%. Wages are rising at around 15% if you're in the right industry, but 90% if people are getting nothing. Wages are rising at around 15% if you are in the right industry, but 90% of people are getting nothing like it, hence the retail fall. So I guess if you are trying to attract people to, say, the armed forces or the defense military industrial complex, you are offering really attractive wages to get the workers, but that's not happening across the board. But also that wage increase will fuel a wage inflation spiral. So the more money you have, the more money you have to pay people to make stuff, the more expensive the stuff is that you're making becomes. So there's an inflationary pressure there, but also the more money you've got, so the more you can spend, and that sends prices up too. So there are double whammies there. Okay, business confidence is down from +6 points to minus or -4 points in a year, and has been an especially sharp drop in 2025. So that's a 10-point shift there in business confidence. Manufacturing has fallen to 0.25% growth from almost 16% last year. Industrial production matches it for all types of industries. Steel production has fallen by 200,000 tons in a couple of months, and it's fallen 460,000 tons since the war started. Car production has fallen from 85,000 a year ago per month, and that's now down to 5,500. Wow. This information is still being published by Russia and is the last available data that they make public. So there's going to be a lot worse data than that. It's just not public, and the data there is probably going to be massaged to be as positive as possible. Right, last thing I'm going to say is, watch out on social media. I don't really follow things like this I don't care how many people, I don't follow stats on like my own Twitter. I barely use Twitter to publish stuff. I use it to get stuff. But Anton Gerashenko said on Twitter, look, I've noticed a sharp decrease in views and comments to my posts in the past few days. It seems that Ukraine-focused accounts might be experiencing the same. Do you see posts from me and other pro-Ukrainian accounts in your feed? How are your own engagement rates? And then this person, Libby Feller, says, yes, targeted censorship. My account was virtually killed after September the 20th. Despite having very high engagement rate, no one sees my post. Elon Musk is actively suppressing pro-freedom voices to support totalitarian oppression. So you can see the stats here, absolutely staggering, precipitous drop there in engagement, and lots of people saying the same. So just, that's what's going on. We are fighting against the algorithms on some social media platforms. Thank you very much for continuing to support my channel, and to try and overcome that, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. We are fighting the good fight, and we're fighting against forces that aren't just Russian. They are pro-Russian, and they look like South African tech oligarchs. So there you go. Anyway, really appreciate your support. I'm off to the hospital. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.